is really pushing my buttons this week. All right, so if you're joining in, leave me a comment. Does it still sound like, as someone so eloquently put it, shit, or does it sound okay now? I did identify the problem. It wasn't plugged in. Like I literally unplugged the hub in the monitor from the laptop, and then this goes into the hub. So anyway, if you are joining in, just let me know that this sound is all right now. There we go. Oh, thank you, Dave. And Wilco79. Appreciate that. All right. So where were we? I got to kind of recap on this now, because what I normally do is after I record this one, this is the one that I leave on the blog, and this is the one I turn into the podcast and I push up. So just recapping on a few little things, and I suspect people are probably a little bit more sympathetic to me stuffing stuff up today than what they might have been, even 24 hours ago, given the last blog post. But we'll come back to that. So, blog sponsor this week, SafePass.me, for about the fourth week. This is feeling like deja vu. Not just the 4 weeks, but me doing this 3 times in a row now. So, big thanks to those folks. They are using Pwn passwords and making very good use of that. Which is really great to see. And they built a little feature which does plug into your Active Directory as well. So for people in your organization, that's a pretty cool thing to do. So you can make sure that they are not using passwords that have previously been pwned. So good on those folks for their ongoing sponsorship and for helping me achieve that consistency, which I spoke about in that blog post as well yesterday. So the bit that cut out just before as well, and some of you might have missed this anyway, but one of the reasons why a whole bunch of my stuff just isn't working at the moment is because I'm literally rebuilding a whole bunch of things. And I'd spoken about this over the last couple of weeks where I had my microphone die. So I've now got this nice Rode Broadcaster mic, although I did discover this week that when you get a Rode Broadcaster mic, it will not work with a Rode shock mount, because if I rotate that around a bit, some of you will see if you look at the video, there's a little high-low pass switch here, and it has a little LED for on air on the end of it as well. And unfortunately, that does not fit inside the shock mount. So that was a surprise, but that's right, no biggie. Unfortunately, the shock mounts are pretty cheap. And then the other bits, of course, that I did show just before, and I'll pick this cam up again and try and show people what's happening over here. So I do have the ultra-wide Samsung now, which is a super, super cool monitor, and that is now mounted down there on a Ergotron arm, and that is a super, super sweet arm too. And there's another Ergotron arm just over there, which is going to have a 27-inch screen that'll go onto it. And there's another Ergotron arm down there on the floor next to my Lamborghini Lego, which I haven't had time to even look at for the last couple of weeks, which will sort of go on the other side, and that'll be just there. So what I'll end up with is like a wall of screen with the big ultra-wide sitting in the middle. And then what'll be super cool is just having those 27-inch screens. Let me try and fix my camera again. Those 27-inch screens either side. So it'll be like a nice kind of super layout. And as I think I said, Burton mentioned earlier on, he suggested I go and get a decent cam rather than just a webcam. So having blowing way too much time Googling all this. Sony A6400, Alpha 6400 looks to be the go, and there's a Sigma lens which has arrived for that, which will be super cool. That's a 16mm lens, which the YouTubers said was really good. There's some really good reviews of it. And then today I had the SanDisk SD card arrive, and this is a dummy battery pack as well. So what this does is goes in where the battery is, but runs off mains. So you can then just run the thing perpetually. And that'll effectively just be a replacement for the Logitech Brio that I've got here. I have been using that for Windows Hello with facial recognition, which has been good, but I do find it's a little bit laggy. So I've actually just ordered an external fingerprint reader. So then my laptops have got fingerprint readers in the PC, or a fingerprint reader. And of course, the main thing is that I've just seen Serta's comment here as well. Main thing is I've got to wait for the PC, which is shipping from China. It's a Lenovo. So, of course, stuff shipping from China is a little bit delayed at the moment. And there is an Elgato HDMI StreamCam HD, the one that can do 4K, which I'm bidding on eBay, and I'm going to pay way too much for it because you just can't get them in the shop at the moment. And there are other HDMI converter devices. So this will literally take HDMI out of the camera and convert it into the PC will then recognize it as a webcam, which will be super cool. And to the comment in here, Burton, about have you got a stand for the camera? Ordered today. So ordered one of the Elgato ones as well, which will clip onto the desk and it'll go up behind the monitor and then has attachments and things. So that should be fine. And the only thing I'm lamenting there is that if I bump this a little bit, my desk does wobble. You can see how the camera wobbles a bit. So particularly when I get everything set up in the normal position again, if I lean on the desk, then things can go a bit wonky. So I might try and mount it a little bit differently. Rambling Geek capture card, the PCI one. I did consider the PCI one, and when I had a look at the Elgato PCI ones, they looked to be predominantly designed to be able to take an output from the graphics card into the capture card and then pass through back out to your monitor, which I just simply don't need to do. If it's just webcam, the USB dongle seems to be the go. Plus, I can plug it into my laptop when, at some point in time, I actually get to travel again too. So that's that. All of that's coming. That I hope a lot of it's done by the time I do this next week. I think certainly the weekly update in 2 weeks from now, I should have the whole place pretty much set up right, which would be great. So that's intro stuff out of the way. Now, a blog post this week. Geez, where do you even start on this? Sustaining pressure under extreme stress. I did call it extreme pressure. Did I say sustaining pressure? Oh my God. Honestly, I haven't even touched a beer. And I realized that all that focus has just gone as well. Apparently the lens, that Sigma lens I showed you, is a really, really super good lens for keeping focus and actually facial tracking too. So the pressure thing. Originally it was called sustaining performance under extreme pressure. I just felt pressure was a little bit of an odd word. So I went with stress because everyone at least got a little bit of a concept about what that means. And as I said in the blog post, I started writing this in September last year. And it was just, I've just found that at times I start to write blog posts when there's something that's weighing on my mind. Now, usually this is of a technological kind of bent. It'll be, why are these people not using HTTPS? why is someone on the internet wrong? Let me write a blog post about that. But look, occasionally it's other things that are a little bit more personal development. Late 2018, I wrote a blog post. In fact, it was New Year's Eve at the end of 2018. I wrote a blog post on financial stuff for technology professionals. And it was just triggered by this wanting to get stuff down that had really nothing to do with tech itself. So the stress thing was really just starting to, I think, be at its worst then. And of course, there was the Project Spellbound and the Have I Been Pwned sales stuff. And then, as I said in this blog post last night, there was the separation and later divorce with my wife as well, which was, it's not something anyone ever plans for, and as common as it is, and it takes a long time to sort of wrap your head around the frequency with which it happens, for me anyway. It's obviously a really stressful thing to deal with. And I just found these two things kind of amplified each other in different ways. But in another way, it was like, all right, well, at least I'm not just sitting there being stressed about the one thing. It's like, I'm stressed about this thing. Let me go and be stressed about the other thing instead for a bit. And I can kind of spread it around. But I guess one of the reasons I wanted to write the blog post was because as I was going through this, I was like, how am I going to deal with this? How am I going to try and process all of this and not lose my freaking mind? And also not drop the ball on running Have I Been Pwned, keep consistency in the career that I'd built. I mean, look, in days gone by when I've been in the corporate world, if I was stressed and I needed a bit of personal time, it'd be okay, fine, do that. We'll keep paying you. You go off and do what you need to do. That's great. That doesn't happen when you're an independent. It's like there's one person accountable for your sustainability. So I started writing this, and as I said at the beginning of it, I said I started writing this blog post, adding to it at the worst of times, and this is what I really sort of began to do. So as I just had a really, really shit period, I'd go, all right, this thing's just happened. What am I going to do? How am I going to deal with it? And then I'd put it in the blog post, sometimes as I was thinking about it, sometimes as I sort of decided on the strategy. And I had a bit of a different order to this when I first started putting it down, because a lot of it was thoughts that chronologically came to me. And then as I started really massaging it over the last couple of weeks, I just found a bit more of a narrative arc to it. And the first thing here was around friends. And in fact, since publishing this blog post, I had a lot of other friends reach out that I hadn't spoken to, that weren't aware of everything that was going on. And of course, many of my friends did know a lot more about the details before yesterday. And this was sort of the point where I just found myself leaning on friends a lot more and sort of talking to them about things that I wouldn't have spoken about before. And I think in general we do this, and I think as guys we probably do it even more. We'll do it even less. You know what I mean? The thing about just not talking about the issues that the personal issues that are on your mind. And that really, really sort of hit home last year, where I realized that I hadn't been discussing a lot of things that were very, very important to me. And frankly, a lot of things that had to do with my sanity and my mental health. And just to be clear, like I don't think I've ever been burned out in any sort of clinical sense. I've never been depressed in any clinical sense or in any medication or things like that. But yeah, all of us go through these cycles, right? Like these ups and downs. And talking to friends was just a really, really great and it's like ridiculously obvious kind of approach, which I should have done a lot earlier on. So I think that's sort of the lesson here. If you're having stressful periods, leaning on friends is super, super important. And of course, it's a little bit harder at the moment to necessarily go out and have a beer together or something like that. But even after I published this yesterday, a good friend of mine from childhood years reached out and we spent an hour on the phone. And that's great. That's really, really helpful. The next point here about not making decisions based on emotions. This is a really hard thing to do. And I think, as I've said here, I certainly haven't always gotten it right, but it's really easy when you have a piece of feedback or a message or something like that. And again, keep in mind this, I'm not going to say which ones of these are related to relationships, which ones are related to the merger and acquisition process I was going through with Have I Been Pwned, and which ones were related to me in the process of buying a house at the time as well. Because a lot of this, intentionally, the way I've written this, is meant to be a little bit ambiguous. It could be anything. I don't really want to go into my personal life about this. And the reality of it is that a lot of what was happening in business was causing the same sort of stresses as what the personal life was. But what had happened, and I think I gave an example in here when I was sort of buying this house, and I got a message back that I was just, it's not that I was angry about it, I was just really disappointed, maybe upset's the right word. And I just went, all right, look, I can't reply to this now. I just got to sit on it. And I did make a point here that I can't think of a time where I've not slept on a message and then toned it down. Every time I sort of drafted something, let it sit, come back the next day, sleep on it, and it always seems to not be as bad. You know what I mean? The situation seems to not be as bad, and consequently the messaging changes. And I think there are many occasions there where, had I not toned it down a bit, things might have actually escalated and actually been a lot harder to deal with. So the next point, I did actually have numbers on all these originally, and then I was like, if I put numbers on them, everyone always wants to make it an even 10. They're like, what are the 10 things that you should do? And I hate that, because it forces you into some arbitrary construct about a nice even numbers that match the numbers of fingers you have. And I just don't think that's a good idea. So these are not numbered. But the next one here was just around remaining focused on the bigger picture and the small steps that take you there. And it's really, really super easy to get focused on minutia and immediate term things, very often things that you're emotional about as well. And you sort of go, like if you take that step back, a few deep breaths and go, all right, take a step back, which is bloody hard to do. And again, it's certainly not something I always do. Where do I actually want to be? Like, what is the end goal of this? What is the point in the future that I want to try and attain, or the position I want to attain? Again, that's something that applies equally, I think, financially and in the business world as it does personally. And if that thing is not, if that little thing, that immediate term thing, is not taking you in that direction, it's just not worth being stressed about. It really is not. And that's a hard one too, because there are a lot of little things a lot of little things that can really, really get under your skin one way or the other. But it's very easy for them to end up derailing you and being your focus. I think now that I explain it out loud this way as well, the thing that I've got to do a lot better of is I have so many micro messages derailing me. I'll be sitting here looking at this massive freaking screen in front of me, trying to do something fairly important. It might be something like I'm doing a conference talk or something like that, and it's due tomorrow, and I've got to finish it. And a message will pop up, and then suddenly I'm focused on that, and it's taken away something that's bigger and more important. So somewhat along those lines, this next point about trying not to sweat the small stuff, there's a lot of things that come up in super stressful times, which in the broader scheme of things really just don't matter. And of course, there's this book, which has been around for ages, Don't Sweat the Small Stuff, and it's all small stuff, simple ways to keep the little things from taking over your life. I'm sure I've read this at some time in the past. I don't know how much of it I remembered, but the theme of it, I think, is actually really good. And that the challenge, of course, is actually trying to do it and do it consistently. That's probably a discussion I had to have with my kids as well. It's like, no, you didn't get to watch the movie. Oh, this was this discussion this afternoon. Didn't get to watch the movie. What? It's not the end of the world. Don't worry. We'll watch something else. I've sort of referred here, one of the things was legal jargon in contracts. And oh my God, the legal jargon I had to go through in contracts around the Have I Been Pwned M&A, especially late last year, it was just an absolute nightmare. There's so much stuff in there. And I remember one example I didn't give in here. I remember just another occasion where it's like my lawyers were arguing with their lawyers, and I was sort of like, I was going, why am I even here? This is not something I have any influence over. It's you guys talking about terms I don't even understand. Like, go away, argue about it, figure it out. I'm not going to stress about it. It was an odd one. I'm just going to pause there a moment so that I can actually read comments. The first thing I see is Scott Helm. You figured out how to computer now, bro. Yeah, talking about mates giving me support. Thanks very much. You do give me a laugh. I'll give you that much, mate. The things in here. If you haven't read the post, it's probably some relevant context to what I'm talking about the rest of this time. That's an interesting point here from the Ethical Hacker. I really enjoy all your blog posts. However, the ones relating to personal development are my favorite. So something really interesting that I've noticed since I've been doing the very occasional personal development blog post or conference talk over the last few years is that those are the ones that always seem to be the most impactful, is maybe the right way to put it, where people come up to me afterwards and go, this is the thing that's made the biggest difference to me. So my Hack Your Career talk, for example, a lot of feedback on that, or things like the financial one I mentioned earlier on. So maybe there's something in that. Maybe we actually got to focus on these a little bit more. All right, so moving on. Moving on to the point here about moving on quickly from setbacks. And I think this is sort of a broader life thing as well, where you do get setbacks, and it's really easy for them to derail those big picture objectives. Look, I mean, the whole Have I Been Pwned no sale in many ways was a setback. And I think in the ways that it was a setback was we had gotten to the point where we believed we had a really, really good fit. And it was like, this is freaking amazing. Like there's one organization which is a good fit. Everyone else was just different degrees of bad fit for one reason or another. And we thought everything was done and sorted. And frankly, it was, by that time, everyone now understands how much other stress was going on as well. It was kind of like, oh man, at least this is going to be one thing that's done. And then that wasn't. But by the time I got to the end of it as well, it was kind of like, at least this is behind me now. Like it's one thing which didn't sort of work out the way I originally envisaged it, but at least the thing is behind me now, and I can just like settle down and just business as usual, the whole thing. There's a bit in here as well where I've got this photo from this hotel room in San Francisco, just after I'd flown from Europe, and my bag had been lost and I was tired. And I think that was probably one of my worst times, just like arriving alone in a bland hotel room. And for those of you that traveled a bit, and you know how sometimes like you'll go into a hotel occasionally you go in a hotel and it's like, wow, this place is epic. And I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the staff, or it's a really flash place, or, they give you champagne when you arrive, whatever it is. Some places just really, really nail it. But I find it's a bit of a rare thing. And so many places are just like a bland repetition of the same old boring thing. And this is what this one was. And then that was on top of everything that was going on emotionally, and losing my bag, and then jet lag and everything as well. And I just remember I was speaking to my parents that night, and it wasn't real good actually that night. But the next day, much better. I went out and literally bought myself new underwear. So I think I got, what I do, I bought a t-shirt and some new underwear, and eventually my bag did turn up. But I was about to go from arriving in San Francisco and start having all of these meetings for the next 2 weeks with all these big tech companies. And I was like, oh man, and I don't even have any clothes. I got one of those like disposable toothbrush things from reception. So I was like, well, at least I can brush my teeth. It's not all bad news. So yeah, look, that was a setback, but again, you get over it. And honestly, by the next day after I had a good sleep, it felt a lot better. In fact, this was one of the things, and I made a bit of a mention of it, where I find myself at the moment, or certainly, and to be clear, like things are a lot more sort of consistent and less stressful than what they have been. At least there's no M&A process at the moment, which is one of the most stressful things I've ever done in my life. But what I find myself doing is at a moment where something feels super bad, I almost get to the point where it's like, you're upset about it, you're emotional about it, and then it's all right, hang on, calm down. This is the worst it's going to feel right now, because it always feels worse right at the moment where you get a message you don't like, or a bit of bad news or something like that. And time again, it's like, okay, you have this sudden peak, and then you just kind of gradually calm down. And I just find myself managing to get to that point faster now, I think, where I'm like, okay, this is shitty, but this is as shitty as it will feel, and it will get better from here on. Usually does. Now, the bit about thinking 3 steps ahead, I don't think this is necessarily just a stress thing, but it certainly helped a lot there, where I'm trying to foresee there are different possible paths that I could take. There's a decision to be made. I could go, door A, door B, door C. Like, which one am I going to do? And what I'm really interested in is what will be the outcome of each door? And very often there's like, okay, there are 3 different possibilities there if I go through that door, if I respond in a certain way, or if I reject a proposal, or whatever it may be. And then, I've chosen door B. Now, door B's got 3 doors behind it as well. What are the different possible outcomes there? And then for those ones, what are the different possible outcomes? And I'm really interested, as I said here, it's almost like sort of 3 to the power of 3 different possible combinations. Like there are 27 different possible outcomes. What is the outcome of those 27 that I want? Like, where do I want to be at the end of those 3 decisions? And sort of going through that, I think it's the right thing in the long term. And the reason I hesitated just then is that my brain just never stops. And this is part of the problem I'm having, where to this day, I seem to just keep waking up at like 2 a.m. with just a million things on my brain. And it's hard trying to process all that stuff and also tune out. So that it's definitely not all positive trying to forecast your own future. But I do think for the most part, it's actually worked pretty well. So I sort of finished this. I only kind of realized this when I was writing it, but I said, in my mind, this is akin to a choose your own adventure book. At each crossroads, there are different ways you can go. Each of those then has their own crossroads, as do those ones too. And I remember as a kid, like reading those adventure books, and there was always different ways it could go. And you're just trying to figure out what are those next 3 steps going to look like. So the next point I made here was around drinking beer. And just to be clear, as I said here, treat this less as a suggestion to consume alcohol and more as a representation of taking time out for yourself. Now, the having a beer thing is, for me, and this is going to sound, I'm trying to say this in a way that's not going to offend someone, because it is the internet in 2020, but it's not a very blokey thing to have a beer and lay in the bath and watch a bit of YouTube. or read a magazine. But honestly, that's what I do a lot. In fact, that's probably what I'll do after this video. I like just laying in the bath having a beer. And I think part of the reason why is it just relaxes me and tunes my mind out. And as I said in the blog post, I've got a mate who's writing a meditation, and he's all very spiritual, which is great for him. At least at the moment, that's something which I don't really have the patience for. Probably should, but regardless. But doing something to disconnect. Now, yeah, by the same token, I also find there's a bunch of activities where I can disconnect. One thing I took out of here because it just didn't go with the flow. But I'd run a bit. But the problem is if I run exercise-wise, my mind just starts going really, really quickly. And I just don't focus on that thing. It doesn't give me the opportunity to mentally tune out. I play a lot of tennis, and I find that when I play social tennis, I can play for about an hour and a half before my mind starts to get, just like in my head, I'm looking around going, oh, yeah, that's interesting. Look at that thing over there. And I lose the focus. If I go wakeboarding, so I go wakeboarding a lot to the wakeboard park here. And when I'm there, like that's all I'm doing. The other things don't bother me. I usually wear my watch and I put it on silent mode so that no phone calls or anything else come up and bother me. And I've been doing that more and more. I've been out with the kids today and just done the same thing. It's like, just put it on silent. I don't care what it is. I just don't want to know about it. I'll deal with it later. And it does give an opportunity to disconnect. So I put in a couple of pictures here, one with you there, Scott. We're sitting on the Marriott here. It was funny, actually. It was like, oh, I must have like loads of photos of drinking beer with friends. And I realized that most of the photos of drinking beer are just like me taking photos of beer. But there's one of Scott and I sitting at the Marriott here when we were doing, this would have been the AusCert conference, May 31 last year. And even one of me at Christmas with socks on. So if you can read this, bring me a beer and a beer in the background. So anyway, again, the point is not necessarily go and drink beer, and there is a bit of a balance issue there. And I'm really conscious that things like alcohol can become a crutch for people as well. So, take that advice with a bit of a grain of salt. And look, also, as I go through this, if you have questions or things like that, drop them in. Like I said in the blog post, I'm going to sort of avoid things that are directly related to my personal life, but things in general, or how I've sort of coped with stress as a concept. Please chuck that in there. Looking at the ones here, Elizabeth, the 3 moves sounds like a bit Jason Bourne or hypervigilance, which can add stress. How do you think of it differently, more helpful? Well, I think it's sort of where I was getting to before, Elizabeth, which is that always thinking about things and multiple moves ahead, it can also be stressful. And the thing that immediately comes to mind there is it means that you're just always thinking about this thing. And I think that there is a double-edged sword there. I want to think about those multiple steps ahead, and I want to try and make sure that I get the right outcome by making the right decisions now. But if you're never switching off, then that's not good either. And I remember someone who actually knows more about medicine than me can probably explain this better. But I remember a long time ago reading about stress, and they're saying, look, stress is basically just slow release adrenaline. So adrenaline, I used to be really into motorsport. There's a lot of adrenaline there, right? And it's like a sudden spurt of it, and you're really excited for a short period of time, and then it passes and you calm down. But stress is just this constant low dose release of adrenaline, which just doesn't back off. And it does worry me a little bit that I don't tune out for stuff like that. So I do think it's a double-edged sword. Burton, do you let off steam as a coping mechanism? I think it depends on what you mean by let off steam. It's rare for me to lose my temper, if that's what you mean. There's definitely been a few occasions the last year and a half, but exceptional. It's probably more like if I was speaking to my mum and dad, where everyone's a little bit different around their own family, I think, and you might just be more exasperated or angrier as a venting channel. But in terms of letting off steam, for me, it'd be stuff like, I am known on Twitter for my jet ski. Like, I'll get on the jet ski and just go and have a blast. Like that's great. Or I'm trying to think of things like, go for an intensive run. And again, I kind of, my mind wanders a little bit too quickly when I run, but that sort of thing. Go for a drive. And of course you got to be a little bit careful there because you don't want to be letting off too much steam on the road, but things that that do feel like a little bit of a relief valve. So yeah, occasionally. So on that exercise thing, this was sort of the next point here about throwing myself into exercise and health. And yeah, this has been a really, really massive thing in terms of, I guess, what I do differently. So I've always been quite health conscious and had a lot of exercise, but it's, I guess, out of this process, it's just kind of focused me more on that. And oddly enough, maybe not so odd, but particularly the COVID situation has really focused me on the exercise thing. So I'm just about to close all my Apple rings for today, which is nice, which will now be basically 3 months worth of closing all the rings every day. But it's because of just getting out much more. And as I said in here, I've been bike riding a lot. I bought a new bike just before COVID, which was a really, really good timing. Love the bike too, so I'm really happy with that. Been riding a lot with the kids. Days like I'm in today is a perfect example. We rode down to the local coffee shop, got some takeaway breakfast, and then rode to the beach and sat next to the beach and ate that, and then had a little ride around the beach, and that helps a lot, exercise wise. And in the blog post here, I embedded a tweet of me at the tennis club eating poke bowl, and there's another image in here of just playing tennis every single day for an hour in the hottest part of the day. And I've just found that has really helped my general well-being. And of course, there's a lot of science. I don't know if it's because of endorphins or something like that, but a lot of other science in there around how good exercise and healthy eating is for your state of mind. And you know, there's a lot of different ways of getting this, right? I mean, it's sort of regardless of where you are or what you have access to. Maybe it's just going for a walk. So a lot of the closing of the rings is just literally doing a lot more walking. Maybe you have a treadmill. Maybe you get like a standing bike or something to that effect. But that's been really good for me. I've been weighing myself on Withing scales for probably the last 6 or 7 years, so I can sort of see the trends as well. And I'm probably in the best shape I think I have been for, I don't know, 20 years. And I don't think, I know, it's not that I've been out of shape, but there's I guess a small band of physical fitness, and I'm probably about 4 kilo lighter than what I was a couple of years ago. It's not that I was overweight. I mean, I'm 6'5" and 82 kilo, thereabouts. Why am I doing imperial and metric together? It's still a weird thing. But also, like, I'm in my 40s too, and if you're not really conscious of your health, that's the sort of thing that does start to go a lot earlier. So anyway, I found that particularly the exercise stuff has been really, really good for me, and being really conscious of diet as well. Today's Friday and the kids do like having pizza, so I'm saying this just before I go and get a beer and eat pizza, but you get the sentiment, right? It's a sometimes food. So the last point here was just around stable routines. And I think the very, just saw the ethical hacker. I'm in shape. Rounders are shape too. The last thing here, and this is effectively what I'm doing now, is around establishing stable routines. And, you know, routine is something that does tend to go out the window during a stressful time. And one thing I didn't put in the blog post, but was a catalyst for writing this as well, is, of course, during COVID has been a really, really stressful time for a lot of people. There's been a lot of people I know personally that have literally had the virus. So I would imagine that would be very stressful. Plus, of course, there's the whole just daily routine changing for so many people, and change is very stressful for a lot of people. A lot of people out there that have literally lost their jobs because of this or had their businesses go under. So I sort of thought now was a good time to kind of get this post out as well, because this pandemic has really, really messed with people's routines. Now, all the travel I did last year, as part of all of the things that were going on, also completely messed up my routine. And even the years before that, where I was traveling quite a bit, I don't think I realized until I started just staying in the one place, just how much that messed up fundamental routines in my life. So I've now been in the same bed since the 2nd of Feb, bar a very short trip to Sydney in Feb for Microsoft Ignite. So that's basically like 5 months sleeping in the same bed, which is super, super weird. But now it's just a nice routine. And frankly, it makes me, it gives me a lot more sort of consistency and stability in life. Now, as I said in here, the one of the saving graces around routine has been, even as I traveled, I always did these weekly updates. And it's interesting, like occasionally someone would pop up very directly on the internet and go, well, you really looked like shit in that update yesterday. I was like, well, yeah, that's because I felt like shit. But I did it, and it was to keep routine and keep consistency. Occasionally, I would end up not doing them till a Saturday. I'd normally do them on a Friday. So it's, where are we? It's almost 6 p.m. Friday afternoon here. And very often that was because I was just in such a state where it's like, look, I just do not have the will to sit down and do this now. But if I offset it by 12, 24 hours, no biggie, I can still make it happen. So that was a big thing. And the other thing is, honestly, the blogging is a routine for me. So it's almost 11 years now since I started writing the blog. And writing things down for me has been part of my therapy, even before I needed the same sort of therapy that I do at the moment, or have done. And yeah, that has been one other way of just getting a little bit of consistency back in life. So look, that was sort of the thinking behind everything. I think the other thing that's probably worthwhile talking about is the feedback that I've had from people on this blog post, which I pushed out now, just under 24 hours ago. And the feedback is just amazing. It's I've had so many, you'll see there's a bunch of comments on the blog post, a lot of responses to the tweet about the blog. I've pinned that to the top of my Twitter now. I've also had a lot of emails and a lot of DMs and people with their own personal stories. And one of the things that sort of struck me over the last, 18 odd months is that there's so many other people with similar personal stories to many of mine, that the merger and acquisition stuff is a little bit unique. But even there, as I said in the blog post, I spent time with people in San Francisco I knew that had done similar things or certainly lived in that world. But just the outpouring of emotion and the responses was absolutely amazing. So yeah, thank you. Thanks to everyone that did actually reach out. And I just can't stretch myself to reply to everything, but I do read everything. Elizabeth says, do you notice that you avoid conflict more now? Hesitate when stressful people pop up because the experience was such massive dual stresses for a prolonged time? That's a good question. Do I avoid conflict more now? Yes and no. The first thing that comes to mind is I think I'm a bit more comfortable with a lot of conflict, just because it's like, well, I've seen a lot of it anyway. Like, how bad can it be? I think there's a degree of that, but also sort of going back to the point about trying not to sweat the small stuff. Some things are just not worth having conflict about. This is going to sound very first world problem, but my irrigation had a leak down here a few weeks ago, and the irrigation specialist came and unplugged the hose from the mains and left the hose into the house open, and a whole bunch of dirt and stuff got sucked into the house. So I had to go and get a plumber to get all that fixed, and got, I think, a $480 bill or something like that from the plumber, and sent it back to the irrigation people. And like, maybe we should pay this in halves and try and make the problem go away. I hope they're not listening to this, but frankly, if they come back and go, no, we're going to be pricks about it and we want you to pay the money, I'm just not stressed enough about it to fight. So I think those sorts of things I don't want to have conflict on. I don't need to have conflict on. It's more a question of what are the right things to have conflict on, because some things are actually very important and they do have long-lasting impact. The sale of Have I Been Pwned, perfect example. Like, if I wasn't happy with the organisation that was going to, all the terms and conditions under it, like that's a life decision. So they had to be right. So I would push back on that sort of thing. So that's pretty much it. I mean, that's what I will say is, I sat on this. What's that now? 10 months. 10 months I've been sitting on this blog post and adding to it, and I'll sort of share more over time as I'm ready. And I don't know when I'm going to be ready, because it's one of the things that it's a little bit hard to predict. But yeah, things are in a much better position now, with the much better stability and consistency in life. So I hope people don't read this and go, gee, Troy's in a real state right now. This has, again, been something that I've sort of added to at the worst of times. So in many ways, it kind of reflects my mindset when I was, having pretty rotten days. But definitely life is settling down and is a lot more consistent. And as many people have said who reached out, and particularly ones who'd gone through relationship breakdowns, said, look, this was, for argument's sake, 2 years ago, happened to me. Really happy with life now. Things are much better. Someone, in fact, I saved their email. I don't know if I can read this. Can I read this? What is he saying? Basically, it was to the effect of how much better their life was now in terms of their parenting ability and the quality that they get out of the everyday. And I think for me, particularly having been away for so long last year, now being home again as well, as kind of almost sounds like this is out of Forrest Gump or something, but I'll be looking up at the sky going, this is amazing. This is so wonderful here in this place. So I think I appreciate the environment here much more now than what I did before. And things like, in that blog post at the end, there's a photo I took on the beach, and I walked, 10 minutes that way, and there's whales and things. And it's like, wow, this is really, really super cool. Now, all that said, all those simple things in life, which are so wonderful, I still love what I do. I really love this industry and the tech stuff. Not just the cybersecurity stuff. I love what I do with Have I Been Pwned. There'll be other things that I'll do in the future as well. I mean, one of the things I maybe love's too strong a word, but one of the things I'm getting some pleasure out of at the moment is just doing a bunch of networking stuff around here with IoT. So there's a lot that I get fulfillment out of. And anyway, I'll talk about the other things in life that are, very, very enjoyable at the moment later on as time progresses. So that was pretty much it. There was a cyber thing. You know what? Let me talk about one cyber thing, because I don't want to just make the whole thing about stress. There's a cyber thing I saw today, which did make me laugh. Now, I'm going to read this out. Barclays Bank. So Barclays Bank in the UK. Someone screen capped this, and they're at https://barclays.co.uk, and they're in the dev tools. And in the dev tools, there's a request to a JavaScript file called target.js. And it's being loaded off webarchive.org. And of course, webarchive.org is a historical archive of websites, and it's loading obviously a very particular version of the file. And what's kind of funny about this as well is it looks like they've got a content security policy that specifically whitelists that JavaScript as well. So someone, for some reason, is serving JavaScript off archive.org as though it's like a CDN, which is just super, super weird. In fact, the person who tweeted this, Phil, originally says, hey, Barclays UK, maybe don't use Internet Archive as a CDN for your JS assets. And as Scott says, cyber. This is, yeah, I don't know why. I don't know why that happens. I think it's quite hilarious. If anyone from Barclays is listening, DM me, because I'd really like to know. I don't think I've seen that before. All right, so that was it. That's what's been going on, and that I think actually getting the transparency of that blog post yesterday. It's very, very hard for me to be a very transparent person and do a lot of stuff online, and then have a whole bunch of stuff that you just don't talk about. So that was therapeutic for me, and there'll probably be more of that as we go along. And per some of the comments earlier on about soft skill stuff, people liking, I'm definitely going to do a lot more of that as well. So thank you very much for watching. I am going to go and grab that beer and order that pizza, and I'll work it off over the weekend. Honestly, I will, because I feel much better when I do that. So sorry about all the false starts making this video work in the first place. I will get all of this stuff very, very neatly organized, if not next week, then the week after, and it's going to be epic when it's done and better than ever. And I'll be looking forward to probably writing a blog post about that, and just getting back to some of the stuff that I enjoy, and getting back to that routine of talking about techie things. So thanks very much for watching, and I will see you next week. See ya.